Welcome back to another episode of Parenting Shrink Wrapped. Sam here with Melissa, and we have a special guest joining us today, Sophia Vale Galano. She is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Los Angeles, and her work primarily is with teens and their families. She's been doing this for over a decade, and the reason she's joining us here today is because she's the author of a brand new book called Calming Teenage Anxiety, a parent's guide to helping your teenager cope with worry. And I will tell you, because I've read the book, that it's practical, it's accessible, it's filled with case studies that help you grasp onto her concepts. But even without the case studies, the concepts, like if you are dealing with a teen who's got anxiety, this will give you some real practical, approachable steps for being the right kind of support for that kid. So Sophia, welcome to Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We're excited for today's conversation.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the lovely introduction.
Before we get rolling on the contents of the book, can you tell us a little bit more about your work and why you wrote the book?
Yes. So, and again, your introduction was lovely and, a nice framework for this. So I've been working with teens and their families for going on 11 years now in a variety of different settings. So private practice, schools, residential treatment centers, hospitals, outpatient centers. And in conjunction with that, I often go and I give parent education talks. So many of these are at local schools. So I live in Los Angeles, so at the schools around Los Angeles. And what I would do is, I'd pick a different subject to speak about. So, I would do parent education talks on, let's say, substance use, depression, vaping. And I remember I did a parent education talk on teen anxiety. And I talk about this in kind of the opening chapter of the book, that it really stood out to me. First of all, how many parents were attending the talk and how many parents were seeking really practical tools of how to help a teen with anxiety. So there was such an immense yearning for support in this area, parents saying, okay, how do I have a conversation with my teenager about anxiety? What do I say? What do I do? I feel like I've done everything wrong, even if I'm coming from a really good place. And it really inspired me to write a book that someone could pick up and begin using immediately. It didn't require months of study or having a degree in psychology. It's something that's very accessible, approachable, and practical.
Well, you've done so.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of the things that you said, how do my parents would come up to you and say, how do I talk to my teen about anxiety?
Yes.
Do you have any do's and don'ts to share with our audience? Because I'm sure that they have the same question.
Yes. So I always like to preface, that what I speak about is kind of more of a general approach. So of course, there are going to be emergency exceptions to this. So I always just let people know that, if, let's say, a teen is suicidal, there's severe substance use, self-harm, we're going to obviously take different actions. But just generally speaking, when a parent wants some practical tools of how to facilitate a conversation, I encourage parents to approach a conversation with a teenager from more of a curious and inquisitive mindset versus a kind of fix it and solution based mentality. And most parents come from the, kind of solution fix it mentality from a place of care, of concern. It's really, it's positive, but what winds up happening is it drives the teen farther away.
There's situations that the parent can't fix. Like, if their best friend is mad at them, like, as the parent, you can't fix that in the moment if they're upset and worried about that.
Right. And oftentimes what parents will say, first of all, what we know as an adult, they're very effective tools. They'll say, well, you're anxious, go for a walk, or have you tried meditating, or just don't worry about it. You're in a fight with your friends and, it's going to work out. It's fine. Yes, all of those are, are actually legitimate, solutions. However, the teen is like, okay, that's not what I want to hear. You don't get it. You don't understand me. And then they shut down.
I always tell parents, like, if you have an anxious kid, like, don't tell the anxious kid, just don't be anxious. Like, it's very, like, devaluing of their emotions if you do that.
Right. Right. And often, again, it comes from a place of care. The parents are like, okay, if I minimize what's going on, it's not going to be as bad. But yes, absolutely. The teen then feels very invalidated, as we approach it with more of a curious, inquisitive mindset of, I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. Would you tell me a little bit more? What is that like for you? What does it feel like? Kind of seeking to learn more can help the teen open up.
And that can be hard.
Oh, yeah.
Like I am the parent of two almost post teenagers. My kids are 19 and 21 at the time of this recording. But when you go to ask your kid about something that you're like, oh God, this is like, I'm worried for them, or scared for them, or I don't want them to be carrying this.
Yeah.
And you're like, it would be nice if I could say, go for a walk, because then I could count on like this being wiped off the slate, right? Like, so on some level, I'm not thinking about it like this, but on some level, if I offer these like blanket solutions, then I can feel like this problem's going away and I can just be here, right?
Yes, totally. And oftentimes, just as a little side note, when I'm working with the teens in my therapy practice, oftentimes a big part of my work is helping the teens understand that the parents are A, doing the best they can, and B, coming from a positive place when they do that, that it's not to try to be malicious or to shut down a teen's feelings.
But there's distress management that has to go along with like that curious approach that you're talking about. Like, hey, tell me more. It can feel like as you're having that curious conversation, on some level, you're kind of endorsing it. Like because I think that like on our bodies, we feel like, oh God, if I get curious on it, if I like
I'm going to make it worse.
Yeah. Like, am I endorsing it? Am I amplifying it?
Yes. And, and I always normalize that for parents, and not just with anxiety. And again, not to totally digress, but oftentimes parents will say to me, I'm worried about, speaking to my teen about sexual health or sexuality or substance use, that I'm scared I'm going to almost like expose them to it and, open the floodgates, when in reality, actually what it's doing is providing a really safe place for the teen to talk about it, where they don't feel judged and they feel that the parent's kind of more on their side and wants to understand. But it's hard as a parent to do that, and I talk about this a lot in my book, that, if a parent has not done that yet, it's okay. It's easier said than done. And, I never expect a parent to kind of have this, all together right from the get-go.
Yeah, but very few of us do.
Right.
So get curious, avoid offering like blanket solutions, although sometimes that is necessary, but
of course.
So what else? What are some things to do? Like what are some tools that parents can lean on to facilitate productive conversation?
Yes. So open-ended questions, and I know if, let's say there's any therapists listening, they're like, well, yeah, of course, but oftentimes, we forget that if we're asking kind of a yes or no question, it's going to close the conversation off. So really leaving space for the teen to elaborate how they feel. And also for parents to remember that one conversation is not the last. So oftentimes people will say, well, I had a conversation with my teen about it and it didn't do anything. And then, with more kind of probing from me, we're like, wait, that conversation was like a year ago. And then we never revisited it, so yes, it's wonderful to do that, but we want to keep an open dialogue. So we want to keep revisiting. And at the same time, we also want to respect if the teen doesn't want to talk about it. So if, let's say, the teen opens up for 10 seconds, but then is like, you know what, I don't want to get into this. It's not the time. We don't want to probe, but, we want to respect the teen. Again, of course, unless it's an emergency scenario, going to be different. But for parents to remember that even if the teen opens up a very small amount, it's massive progress, and not to get discouraged and to keep revisiting, not to just have one conversation, kind of check it off the box and be like, okay, now I'm done. And having said that, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into this later, but also for parents to be very creative and, maybe how and where they're having a conversation.
You had some good suggestions in the book for like how to springboards.
Yeah, because I remind parents too that, teens are not expert communicators. So that's something to keep in mind, that the teen, I always joke that, I'm sure there are some teens out there who would say this. I haven't met them. So, please let me know. I'd love to beat them and study them. No, a teen is not going to sit across, the dining room table from their parent and say, Mom, Dad, I'm really struggling. I could use some emotional regulation techniques and some enhanced coping skills. Like, no, like they're going to say, everything sucks. I'm freaking out. I don't want to go to school. No one likes me. It's going to sound different than how an adult would communicate. So for parents to remember that oftentimes the conversation might look different than we would think.
You know what? I was working with a client who doesn't like swearing in their household, which I think is a fine value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not every household is as bothered, but this family was like not cool with swearing in the household.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And right, and so the kid came in and was like, this, and I'm not going to say the swear word on this, but like, this effing sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And the parents' inclination was to be like, we're not cool with talking like that in the household.
Right.
I said, wait a second, your kid is emoting.
Right.
They're giving
They're
you
trying
something.
to communicate. Yeah.
Right. So instead, say what sucks.
Yes.
Like skip the effing part. Just overlook for now.
Yeah.
And ask what's upsetting them. Right.
Yes.
So like you said, like they're not, this was how this particular child was
communicating.
Yes.
Trying to say that they needed help. Like that is a cry for help.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you grew up in a household where it's not okay to swear, and you've got a potty mouth going, like in a way, like that is a teen's way of being like, I need something.
Notice, right?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. And it can be really challenging for parents to also differentiate, okay, is this my teen like actually seeking out help or support, or is a teen just being defiant or kind of like the standard teen angst or rebellion? Right. So again, it's really important for parents to also be compassionate to themselves, that it can be hard to do this. A lot of it is kind of like reading between the lines.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what are some signs that anxiety is, because anxiety is just an emotion we all feel it sometimes.
Right.
And it's not necessarily clinical. Like there's good reason to feel anxiety. Right.
Totally.
So how do you make this distinction between this is normal and this has become clinical?
Right. And it's a great question. And even, for parents, with kind of any takeaway, that can just feel very empowering for them to know the difference. And, kind of general rule of thumb, what I recommend for parents is to assess how often a teen is struggling and to what extent. So, I give kind of this sort of general example of a teen sitting down and taking a test at school. So, if a teen is, anxious, nervous, they're stressed before the test. However, they can sit through the test, they can go on with their day, they can get their other assignments completed, they attend their extracurriculars, hang out with their friends out of school. Okay, we're not going to overlook it, but we're going to take a different approach than if a teen, let's say, throws up before the exam because they're so nervous, or has a full-on panic attack before the test, or refuses to go to school, or their other classes, like their grades are suffering because they're so distracted by this test that they can't complete their other assignments, or they can't go to their extracurriculars, or they're just so distraught that the idea of kind of socializing with friends is just completely off-putting. That's where we're going to want to take a closer look. And we're going to want to know how often this happens. So if, let's say, there's a teen that has that kind of reaction and it happens once a year, we're not going to disregard it. Of course, we're going to take note of it. But again, we're going to take a different approach than the teen that this happens to multiple times a month, or multiple times a week, or once a week, So we're just going to use a very also like mindful observation in terms of the teen's behavior. And that's kind of can give us a nice little blueprint of, is this concerning, or is this kind of more sort of standard life stresses? It can be a helpful starting point.
And if you're not sure, like, the three of us here swim in teen waters,
Right.
So like if you're not sure, because not like, let's say you have an only child and this is like, and you are, and your career has nothing to do with adolescence, right?
Yes.
And so like, this is the only access to the world of adolescence you have, except for when you used to be one.
Yes.
Right?
Which was different. It was definitely generationally different.
Yes.
Oh gosh, such a different world.
It's worth consulting. And if your child doesn't have a therapist, call a school counselor, like call someone who has some what's the word I'm looking?
Expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, or like.
And I think like Sam, like I think the school counselor is a great place to start. Or if there's a teacher that like knows your kid really well, like schools spend a lot of time with your kids.
Yes.
You know, and
Yes.
like, and if you're not sure, you have like access to an immediate resource.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I turn to that person. I say the other person to turn to is like your kid's primary care or pediatrician. Like,
Yep.
they may not necessarily be a mental health professional, but they know child development.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So they can start to tell you that fine line, like Sophia is describing, between like, hey, this is normal, and like, it's okay to be anxious about the test, and no, it's not okay that like your kid is like refusing to go to school because they have a test today. Like, there's a big difference in there, but they can help you tease that apart.
Yeah.
And they also know your kid. Like, if you've been going to the same person for a while and your kid is 15, 16 years old, you've at least had enough touch points with this person.
Definitely. Definitely. That's
and the
so
school's
important.
the same way. Like,
Yep.
and those are immediate access resources that people have.
Yes. I love that you said that, because oftentimes people forget about that, you know, and it can feel really overwhelming parenting an anxious teenager. That's like, what do? I don't understand. This is a completely different language. The teen, when you said that about the generational difference, they really are living in a completely different world. So I love that, of lean on the resources that are available, the pediatrician, the school counselor, the teachers, you know, and I also encourage parents too, you know, to seek their own therapy as well, to make sure they have their own forms of support.
Well, and because if your kid is anxious, it's going to spark anxiety in yourself. So
Totally.
I mean, I think you just need to accept that.
Yes. No, I completely agree.
As a parent. So,
and also it can be vice versa. I always say apples and trees. Like, when I'm working with an anxious kid, oftentimes I'll be like, okay, which adults in your household also have a flavor of it? And they know. They're like, oh, it's dad. It's definitely dad. Right?
Totally. Totally. And it's funny that you say that, because oftentimes, you know, I'll have a parent that, you know, comes to me and they say, hey, I've checked all the boxes. Like, I'm trying everything I can to really talk to my teen about what's going on. And they're so resistant. Like, what do I do?
Yes.
You know? And it can
what do they do?
Yeah.
What do you do, Sophia?
Yeah. And this is where, you know, I encourage parents, going off of what you were saying a minute ago, is to compassionately and very mindfully self-reflect and look into themselves, saying, okay, well, what's my energy like? Am I really anxious? Am I really stressed out? You know, and again, in a non-judgmental way, but of, you know, could my teen maybe be picking up on some of that? You know, are there areas where I could benefit from improving? Like, maybe it would be helpful for my teen to see me set better boundaries with people, or practice more self-care, or see that I can say no, or I can, you know, take a break, you know, and that can be, first of all, so empowering, you know, for the parent. You know, it's so healing and empowering for the parent, but also for the teen. And it doesn't require any collaboration from the teen. Like, that's all on part of the parent, which is amazing when we have a really resistant teenager who's like, I do not want to talk to you. I want nothing to do with this. You know, it can be such a weight off our shoulders as a parent to say, oh, I can do this on my own.
But also, you didn't say these exact words, but I'm reading between the lines here. Yeah. It sounds like you would, as a clinician, you'd recommend that.
Oh,
like, if a parent came to consult you, you would say, like, hey, are you modeling good boundary setting in your life? Are you are you overextended? Are you in a state of persistent frenzy? Right? Like, these are things you would ask the parent.
100%. Yes. And again, you know, for parents to be compassionate with themselves, that, you know, it's natural, you know, as parents, it's very stressful, you know, we're carrying a lot of weight. So it's understandable. And what do we do?
I think sometimes I find when I'm working with athletes, this is like the worst of it. Yeah. Because oftentimes athletes like motivate themselves by yelling at themselves, because that's what they've learned is how coaches do things. Not all coaches, but like
they shouldn't do.
So they sort of like damn themselves into action, and that works. Like, oh, you're so tired. Just dig harder. Just try better. Like, come on, you know. So they sort of yell at themselves. And in athletics, that does actually bring them to like the next, that often results in success.
Yeah.
And so some of us not just former athletes, but some of us motivate ourselves the same way. So like if something happens, and I mean, I'm saying us adults,
Yeah.
the kids too. So like we screw up in some way, instead of being like, oh, well, there's always tomorrow,
Right.
like we, in order to like prevent the next screw up, we dwell in it for a second and we're like, I'm such an
Yeah.
idiot. Like, or like,
Yeah.
what's my problem? Why can't I just get this right? And we think
Totally.
that doing that is going to be of service so that we will be less likely to, we're putting pressure on ourselves now to not make that
Yeah.
mistake. When
Yes.
our anxious
Yes.
kids, this is a long way of saying, or question, when our anxious kids hear us doing that, that only amplifies, like if they're going to follow our attribution style, right, that's going to amplify their anxiety.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And yes. And again, I never expect anyone to have it totally together all the time. And that's something also that I tell parents too, that it's also okay for parents to be okay also saying no to their teen if there's a time where the teen, let's say they want to have a conversation with the teen, but they're so burnt out. The parent themselves is like, okay, I know I'm going to get a work call in 10 minutes. I know my siblings or my other child is going to come in. I know I'm going to be interrupted. I'm exhausted. It's going to be very challenging for me to hold space. It's also okay to say to the teen, again, of course, unless an emergency, like, can we schedule another time to chat about this, and that even in itself, that's practicing really good modeling, because that's telling the teen that it's okay for them to do that as well, and that even if the teen is, at the time, kind of rolls their eyes or is like, yeah, whatever, they still are going to pick up on that, and I remind parents about this piece too, that, most teens are not going to outwardly express their gratitude or acknowledgement of this. Like they're not going to say, Mom, you are doing an amazing job leading by example and modeling, but they're picking up on it. So also for parents not to get discouraged if they're not being credited or appreciated, it's still there. It's still being seen.
I think when you do get those thank yous, you really
hold on to it forever. Yeah.
Like hold on to those thank yous, because they're probably few and far between.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Like use it to keep motivating you.
Yeah, they're not going to give you the satisfaction of like,
No.
You don't get to watch your teen be transformed before your very eyes by your amazing parenting maneuvers, right? Like they're never going to give you that.
There's that like thanklessness part of parenting.
Right. Yes. Maybe they'll tell you, in 20 years when they have their own children. Yes.
So there's also the opposite. When you're parenting anxious kids, you've got the kids who are kind of resistant and don't want to engage, but then you've got the kids who are like the opposite, who just want to dwell in it and who need constant reassurance seeking.
Yes.
How do you deal with those kids?
Yes. And this is a tough one, and I go into this in my book, and full transparency, I'm working on my second book, which really like the bulk of my second book is about this, of the kind of rescuing versus, setting boundaries versus enabling, because it's really, really tough because we want, I write that one down. No, so it's understandable. We want to be compassionate, of course, and again, we don't want to brush aside what a teen is going through. We want to validate them. And we also want to be very, very mindful if we're rescuing when we don't need to, and oftentimes this is really tough because it's the really caring, the really compassionate, the really empathetic parents that kind of have the tendency to fall into that, where, they will say, okay, my teen's anxious before the test. I'm immediately going to email the teacher and say, like, can we get extra credit? Can the teen retake their assignment?
Can we get extra credit, right?
Yes. And
not we. You passed high school.
Yes, exactly. And it sounds kind of a wild concept, but I see it all the time, and I say, what kind of message is that sending also to your teenager? It's telling the teenager that, they need you to do this. It's not giving them good skills for entering adulthood. And what happens if the teen decides to go to college, like how are they going to know what to do? So it's kind of a fine line here. We want to find a middle ground of, okay, is this where I'm supporting and helping a teen that's beneficial to their growth, or is this something that I'm actually kind of enabling, or am I rescuing here?
Sophia, what do you recommend? So I've had this scenario come up many times in clinical practice where the anxious kid will be asking like the same repetitive question, right? So like they have a worry, say, about, I don't know, the weather.
Yes.
I've had kids who have like storm anxiety. And like, you know, they'll ask like, what's the weather today? Parent, they'll keep asking, or, 5 minutes passes, we ask again. Like, they're on this like loop.
Right.
And like the parent is totally spent and exhausted because they've answered the same question now.
Yeah.
Who knows how many times. So they're like stressed. They're in like a fight or flight response at this point because their own anxiety's up. Like, they're getting angry. Like, it brings up their own emotions.
Yes.
What do you recommend parents do to like get out of those like types of kids that are on these like repetitive thought loops?
Yes. And, just to preface, this is why it's really helpful for parents to make sure they have their own forms of support, because it is, like, even just saying that, it's like thinking of that situation. It's like, oh my goodness, like, I feel for the kid, but I really feel for the parent, and it's like, how do you stay calm and present when, you're kind of at, the end of the rope, you know what I mean? So
I call those sandpaper on my brain moments.
Yes, yes, totally.
He's just like gnawing it, grinding it down.
Totally. And again, that's why, I really do feel that it's important for parents to have their support, particularly if their teen is prone to this type of behavior. Yeah. And this is where also, and obviously every situation is different, but where I really encourage parents to kind of pause and, whether it's to sit down with their teen and say, okay, we talked about this was kind of our outcome, this was our verdict, let's kind of hold on to that, let's be compassionate, it's okay that you feel this way, and let's also remember that this is what we discussed that the weather is going to be, and this is what we discussed would happen if the weather is going to be like that, of kind of playing out the tape a little bit, of helping them kind of pause or stop kind of the, not to use the kind of therapist lingo, but kind of the like dysfunctional thought pattern here. But it's also, again, it's also okay and natural for the parent to be really frustrated. So a big part of my job is really normalizing that it doesn't mean that the parent's a bad parent if they're losing patience. It is really, really hard parenting a teen with anxiety.
It sure the heck is. It sure is. One of the things that I loved in your book was you've got the first 2/3 of it are about parenting a teen with anxiety, and then there's the last chunk. I don't know if that's a separate part, but the last bit, part 3, additional support, was like about you had stuff in there like how to be a good parent in your kid's therapy experience.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Like,
all the therapists listening are probably like, thank God. Yeah.
I was like, that's fantastic. Or like other things that could be of help besides therapy, like breath work and like Reiki. Like I just, you had these kind of other, like, I don't know, sideline elements of working with a kid with anxiety. So my favorite, truly, I when I finished, I was like, this is a term I'm going to use, but again and again, I have used it since then. Was when you were like, okay, when your kid's in therapy, sometimes you're going to want to know how that's going and what's happening, but you're not the star, you're a guest star.
Yes.
You make a cameo in the show, and they are the star.
Yes.
I was like, that's exactly right. Like, I loved that.
Thank you. And thank you. I appreciate that, because I think too, and this usually comes from, again, like the very concerned, caring, compassionate parents, is they want to be very involved, but what that can do is, actually, kind of create more resistance from the teen. The teen doesn't feel that they have their kind of privacy, their support, their independence, and it goes back to the teen feeling more controlled or treated as a child versus being treated like they're sort of a young adult. And again, it's a fine balance because they are kind of still half a child, half a young adult, so it's tricky. But oftentimes the most well-meaning parents, I'll get calls from them and say, what is my kid learning in therapy? I want a list of the tools that they're using, which is like, okay, obviously that's important, but we really want to respect a teen's independence in therapy and also remember that it's not a one size fits all. So there's some teens that really benefit from, the once a week therapy sitting with, a clinical therapist. And then there are other teens that, that doesn't resonate with them, and it's helpful to get them involved in kind of more of like a kind of group setting, or working with a coach, or getting kind of more mentorship, and integrating these other types of holistic models in there,
or just getting them doing the thing they're afraid of.
Yes.
Getting them to approach the thing they're afraid of. Like I again, this is with a parent coaching client, and she was really worried about her son, who was kind of like getting introverted, not introverted, like withdrawing into himself. And he was a middle school boy, and he was refusing therapy, but she was like, I know he's not happy. And I said, have you thought about getting him a personal trainer to work out with? And she was like, why would I do that? And I said, because if you get the right person who's got experience with teens, like, you're building his self-esteem, you're making him do something that's like hard work, but he's going to enjoy the results of the work. He's also it's got some social cachet to like be in shape and be athletic. Like, anyways, that's what she ended up doing. And she's like, he loves going. She has access to the coach, because like she can talk to, so she can be a bird in his ear and be like, here's what happened this week. Right?
Totally.
So it was a great way.
That's so cool.
Like she took this roundabout way of getting her child support.
Awesome. And that's so great.
It's not a one size fits all. And I think that's exactly what that story highlights, is that there's many different ways that you can help your kid.
Yes. And that's why I remind parents also, just, as discouraging as it can be and as hard as it can be, to validate the hardship within themselves, and also to do their best not to get discouraged, that there's so many different approaches and so many different modalities and so many different types of practitioners out there. And like you said, it isn't a one size fits all. To maintain kind of a creative sort of outlook of like, okay, well, maybe if this didn't work, how about we try this? Or how about, I'm open to researching, what else is out there? I'm going to read more books. I'm going to listen to more podcasts. I'm going to do whatever it takes to, help my child.
All right. Well, so Parenting Shrink Wrap listeners, if you are listening, the book is called Calming Teenage Anxiety, A Parent's Guide to Helping Your Teenager Cope with Worry, by Sophia, Vale, Galano, LCSW. And it is very well organized, very well laid out. And you can skip to part 3 if you want to read about being a guest star in your kids' therapy session. But parts 1 and 2 are worth the read as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Sophia, thank you for joining us. Listeners, thank you for tuning in for another episode. And thank you, as always, for raising the next generation of world changers. We love you, and we love your kids. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride called Parenthood here at Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We hope today's episode gave you some useful tools and maybe even a few laughs to help you navigate the twists and turns of raising teens and kids.
Remember, parenting is a journey, not a destination. And no matter where you are on the road, we're here to help you stay on course. Whether it's monumental meltdowns, teenage turmoil, or just the everyday chaos, you don't have to travel this path alone.
So until next time, keep your seatbelt fastened, your sense of humor intact, and your eyes on the road. We'll be back soon with more compassionate conversations and practical strategies to support you and your family.
Don't forget to subscribe to Parenting Shrink Wrapped wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you've enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review and share it with a friend.
If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, feel free to send us an email at parentingshrinkwrapped@gmail.com.
Until we meet again, take care and enjoy the ride.